Things have been rough at work recently. Hey Nut, how have things been with you? You know, part of me is kind of glad that you decided to take on Tai Chi instead. It's a very calm way to empty your already empty mind.
This isn't Tai Chi, you filthy swine. This is true karate. For unlike you, uncouth peasant, I am a true master of the blood sport. And with these skills, I'm going to beat out all of the competition and finally get back the money that will get me out of this absolutely huge debt we seem to be in, unfortunately.
Doesn't look like you're gonna be able to get anyone moving in slow motion like that.
And what do you know about karate? You don't seem like you could even lift an empty bottle. Unlike me, I'm a true master, and not only that, I've gotten an instructional video from the best in the profession.
That's a much smaller case than usual. It feels like usually the games that you get are in a much bigger case than this.
Ah, there you go again with all your negativity. Have you ever thought of just doing it in your life? About making back all the money that we owe? Well, I mean, I'm the one who owes it, but still.
I would be surprised, but at this point I feel like you finding like pieces of shit like this is just an endless miracle that keeps me earning like the basic amount of money required to keep on living, so I ain't gonna complain. That said, I get the feeling this isn't probably gonna teach you much of what you need to win in a blood sport battle. I feel like there are much bigger games out there in the same genre which deal with this very same subject.
With the power of the martial arts I have attained from this instructional game, I'm sure to beat out all of the fools at the tournament. And then you'll see, for I am the strongest that there is.
Ow. I'll tell you what, while you continue to do your Tai Chi and hopefully don't hit yourself in the head, I'll go make a video about why this game is bad. You just keep doing that. Yeah, and don't give yourself a heart attack in the process. I mean, you're already pushing 30 you're growing a little old, unlike me, hip and spry, so yeah, you just stay safe, alright? Like every other genre out there, the fighting game genre is one that has, always had its fair share of strange titles across the years. After the boom of the genre during the 90s in Japan with titles such as Street Fighter 2, Tekken 3, Virtua Fighters and many more, there were many other people who decided that they too wanted to make a fighting game. And while some came out pretty good, you did get some that were kind of strange but beloved in their own ways, like Dong Dong Never Dies or Fight of Gods, for example. But the game that we're going to be talking about today, it's not really any of these ones at all. In fact, this was a game that was apparently so bad during its day that in the year that it came out, it actually created a new record, as it was the first ever game that the Famitsu Cross Review actually gave the lowest score that it had ever given in its entire time, even till this day for that matter. For those who are wondering, the Famitsu Cross Review is basically a review by the Famitsu magazine in Japan, where they basically get 4 different reviewers to come together and get each of them to give the game a score out of 10. And their summative score is basically the game's actual score on the cross review. And this game basically was the first ever consumer title, that is to say, a full package title for a console or PC release that actually got a 12. Unfortunately for the game, while it was one of the worst games historically according to Famitsu, it didn't even manage to get the title of being the first game to hit that record, as 1 month before it, a pachinko game actually got that record. So yeah, we can kind of see that we're not going down some really good routes right now. But to be fair to the game, it's not like the Famitsu Cross Review has been known to be the most accurate or reflective of user sentiments out there. After all, in 2005, it did give a 40 out of 40 to a game like Nintendogs, for example. In 2008, actually went to 428's Shibuya Scramble. And you kinda even had Skyrim actually hitting the list at a 40 out of 40, which, look, I know that the latter 2 games, there are some people who would say that these are really good titles and that do deserve to be considered very good games. But the fact of the matter is that calling them a 40 out of 40, to me at least, doesn't seem to be the most accurate either. It feels a little bit like they're just glazing them a little too much at that point. What is this game that we're talking about? Imaginary person that I'm pretending is there so that I can actually ask this question? Well, that game happens to be Shura no... Oh, sorry. Apologies. This is one of those really old games where they kind of have the jacket cover that actually exists outside the game. People know about these things, right? People have seen CDs in their life still, right? It's not a retro concept, right? The concept of a external disc jacket that kind of goes here and just goes like It's not that old of a concept, right? But anyway, the name of the game is Shura no Mon. So Shura no Mon is actually the name of the original manga that the game is also based off of. It is kind of interesting to me that with this game, they actually didn't add any form of subtitle to it. All the more so when you consider the fact that the publisher was Kodansha as well. So you would think that in order to make it a little more distinct from the original manga IP, they would actually put in some of the subtext below it, so it'll be like Shura no Mon, and then like the Tourney of Evil or some other like corny ass name like that. But fortunately for the creators of this IP, unlike with Major, the baseball series, this game actually didn't kill off all hopes of a future game for the IP, although the next game that it got was actually more of an RPG command battle style game instead. For those of you who do not know anything about the series, basically it was a fairly old series that was created in 1989 that was focused around the main character Tsukumo Mutsu of the fictional Mutsu anime Ryu style, who goes around basically fighting in tournaments and the like against other forms of actually existing mixed martial arts instead. So things such as the Gracie's Jujutsu, some other forms of karate that exist within Japan, so on and so forth. The whole series is basically just a lot of like martial arts fighting. Nothing over the top in the sense of something like Baki nowadays, nor is it something on the level of like JoJo with its Hamon in the initial years either. It was a fairly more grounded-ish martial arts series where the guy would kind of fight and people's bones get broken a fair bit. And overall, it's a series that actually did pretty well. Back in the year 1990, it actually won the Kodansha Manga Award. For the shonen category, it had 2 spin-offs in the 2010s, and on top of that, I think it sold around 30 million copies back in the day. So a series that did really well for that period, although it isn't really one of those that has like aged and lasted all the way into the modern day, especially overseas, where I get the feeling that because of the fact that it didn't really get an anime series until in the 2004, it probably wouldn't have taken off or gotten the same level of popularity as it did for Japan during the days where the series was at its peak. And so you might think that with the manga series releasing and booming just before the fighting game boom of the 90s, that with this game slated to release in 1998, you would be in a very prime position to have a game that could have been really interesting and they would have caught the eyes and sold well in the period where fighting games were at their peak, right? Well, I mean, this game did have a little bit of a challenge going up for it. After all, 1998, the time that this game specifically released as well, which was at the start of April, was basically just 1 week before the PlayStation release of Tekken 3. So as you can imagine, for those of you who do not know like Tekken or fighting games much, Tekken 3 is considered to be one of the classics, especially for the series itself, pretty defining in its own way. And for this game to come out just 1 week after that, it's like, you know, you're gonna get compared a little if you want to be generous about it. So, but even then, for the game to end up getting the worst rating that Famitsu had ever given to any game that wasn't a pachinko game, just what could possibly have happened to it? Let's find out together. So before we get into the actual game itself, there are a few things that we need to talk about the way the game starts off and the UI choices for the game. So first thing, the game when it first fires up, there's actually no opening at all. It's just a bizarre loop of one character doing a bunch of practicing like stances and movements on the screen as it circles around him, and this would basically just keep looping until you push a button. So it feels like a very bizarre way to start a game. I guess you could say in its own way it's a little unique because of the fact that you don't really see games doing stuff like this. I feel like having it just cut off at some point, or telling people to push start, or maybe having it be something that goes on in the background of the main menu would have been a lot more easy to understand, which, might I add, you know, that kind of sounds a little calming, to be honest. Therapeutic almost. I'm sorry guys, but I think I have been called. I have to go.
What is the meaning of life? Can we ever truly say that we have been alive? Is there even life beyond this life of life? Did I leave the stove on and the gas running? I hope my electricity bills aren't too high.
You consider that Tekken 3 came out in the same period as it, I can't imagine that just from this very point alone, people were probably looking at it and complaining about how cheap it feels. Though whatever all this was, this wouldn't have been that bad. However, according to people who actually knew what was going on the screen, this was actually supposed to be a form of karate kata known as tensho. So apparently the motion capture had messed up so bad that the style itself, the movements no longer resembled the original thing that they were supposed to be at all. So as you can imagine, for a series that was focused on all this kind of mixed martial arts, in particular with its start in karate, would be actually fairly poorly revealed, just because of the fact that like it doesn't seem to understand fully the source material that it is trying to actually take from at all. Another reason why the game got poorly reviewed in Japan was also because of the fact that people actually didn't like the fact that the game was too traditionally Japanese instead of anything, because when it came to the UI design itself, many of the text choices for things such as the menu options and the like all were intentionally done using much more traditional Japanese text instead. For those of you who have never really played like the original Japanese versions of many of these fighting games, one thing you'll notice is that for most games in general, especially for Japan during the 90s onward, is that they tend to some extent use English within the games. So like things like the press start button, most of the time it would also be in English. Sometimes you might see them put like starto in like Japanese instead, but typically it is usually using something that is a bit more modern in general, and the consumer taste at the time had basically shifted more in that direction. And the thing with the way it's written in Japanese is that it's not even like it's just written in Japanese, but it's intentionally using much older and traditional Japanese, which, you know, if you were making a game about the Sengoku era or something, maybe I could understand that. But apparently because of the fact that the original manga itself wasn't one that really played into this kind of aesthetic either, people just found it very strange why the game was doing all of this, and apparently it was just so strange at the time that it kind of actually took people out of the immersion instead. But for the most part, for the preamble, that's about it. As for the game itself, as I mentioned before, it's a very standard fighting game, and honestly I would say that, you know, for all the complaints the game has gotten and how badly it was reviewed, I would have to say that this portion is actually fairly decently done at least. Like, the controls were better and more responsive than the Jujutsu Kaisen like fighting game Curse Clash that released in 2025. You could argue that perhaps it was a little bare bones because unlike most of the modern fighting games, it was one that wasn't really combo heavy, and it wasn't really one that had many of the hallmarks of the other games. Instead, it felt a lot more like a very heavily footsie focused game instead. There's no air combat, there's no jumping at all, there's no range attacks, you can't perform anything like an Oki, for example, to like knock someone up who's on the ground. Like, all of the things that people usually expect to some extent in a modern fighting game all just did not exist in that. A large part of the game was really trying to get into range and trying to read what your opponent would do so that you could block at the right time, strike at the right range with the right attack to hopefully stagger him so that you could go in to quickly like perform your combo. But even with the combos in this game, for the most part, there aren't any ways to do very long high damage combos. Most of them maybe would last like 4 to 6 hits, and it would maybe take off about at most a third of the guy's health. So suffice to say that there is a lot of opportunity to actually get back up, and then you would have to repeat the whole footsie process of trying to read your opponent and try to get in and hit them instead again, because of the fact that the game doesn't really have any ways to actually like poke or like zone your opponent or jump across them or anything like that at all. In trying to replicate the original manga series to some extent, the game has one system that I won't say it's wholly unique, but it's a system that you only see in a rare few games within the genre, which is the limb break system. And the way it works in this game is that basically every character to some extent has some skills that can either grapple the opponent and break a limb, or counter an attack and then break a limb. And then depending on what limb you break, you can actually like reduce your opponent's ability to perform during the battle itself. So like if you get the guy's right arm, then he can no longer punch with the right arm. If you get the leg, he can potentially no longer kick with that specific leg, or some of his attacks actually would no longer work at all. Because of the setting of the manga itself, it did make a little more sense, and I do feel like it actually added a bit more of a additional interesting dynamic into the game as well, because of the fact that you kind of have to ensure that you're not walking into your opponent's abilities that could potentially shut you down. And depending on the character you play, some characters have a bigger focus on like attacking with their hands instead of their legs, so you kind of need to know what abilities your opponents have, what kind of abilities they can shut down from what range and all of that. And like there's a lot of that going on, and I do feel like that's kind of interesting as well. So at the very least, they were trying to do something unique with the game in making it its own thing, different from some of the major fighting titles out there at the time. However, that's about where all of the good things I can say about this game come to an end, because after that there really isn't more else that you can really say to defend this game or anything that it did at the time, to be honest. Like, as a fighting game, it did a slightly serviceable job, yes, and then you go on with the rest of the game and you start to see more and more issues start to kick in. But one of the bigger issues with the combat is the fact that, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of grapple focus in this game, and the thing with the way the grappling works is that when a character like dashes in, for example, and grapples the guy, the camera would start to pan itself when the tool actually get knocked onto the ground. So once you push the guy to the ground and you like mount him and start to hit him, the camera will cut to a position where it's easier to see what is actually going on. So, you know, focusing on the action, I think that's fairly important, especially in this kind of segments of the game where it's not like you could do anything from the original camera angle that will make a difference to whether or not you can get out of the grapple. But the problem with the game is that when the grapple ends and both of you get back up, there is a very real possibility that you might not get up in the original direction you're in. So you might have started the game on the left, grappled the guy, and when you get up, you're starting on the right of the screen. But the game doesn't really have a good way to tell you which side you will actually end up on. So you kind of have to like guess and hope for the best that you end up on the side that you think you are, so that you can then move and respond to what your opponent is going to do next. Which, you know, if your opponent is another human player, it's not that bad because you both have this orientation issue. So both of you need to kind of figure out where you are before you can actually do anything. But against the AI, the CPU, it becomes a lot more of a problem, especially when you consider the fact that most of the people who are going to be playing a Kusoge game that has basically been rated the worst game by Famitsu, you're not going to find many people who actually own the game, and you probably don't have enough friends to actually play this game with. There also seem to be some balance issues with it. Like, I don't know exactly how this happens, but like when it comes to the grapples themselves, there were times where the grapple seems to go on infinitely, and I don't know why it goes on infinitely. The game doesn't do a good job of explaining it. So like there was once where the opponent was at almost full HP. I managed to grapple him, and somehow the grapple attack just like lasted through his entire 2 HP bars and he just died right there on the spot. Which is a really big problem that the game even does this, considering the fact that the game doesn't teach you how to deal with the grappling in the first place. The big criticism that I would have with the grappling system in this game is just the fact that it doesn't really try to resemble or mimic real-life grappling combat where there's a lot of like movement on the ground. People are trying to shift their positions so that they can get out from under the opponent or prevent the opponent from trying to get them into an armbar. There's a lot of like scrambling on the ground to try and take the superior position, or as the BL lovers or they will put, to be the one on top. The game doesn't have any of that at all. It really is a case of if when you grab the guy, you can toss him to the ground and then you just wail on the guy until I think pushes a button to manage to break out of it. It's very hard to know what you're supposed to do there because the game doesn't actually explain it within the game itself, and there's no form of tutorial anywhere either to basically help you to understand what you need to do to break out of the combo. Although the funny thing is that this was part of the reason that Famitsu gave the game such a low rating, but according to people who actually played the game extensively, apparently it's actually fairly easy to prevent the grapple from actually happening in the first place. So the moment they grab onto you, it's actually like in many other fighting games, you can actually push a button to basically break the grab. So before they can even grapple you to the ground, you can just break it. And if you know how to do that, basically most of the grapple characters go from being like S tier infinite kill characters to F tier characters because of the fact that you can easily just stop everything they do by just like timing it at the right time. Characters actually are balanced in an interesting way around the grapple, but the thing is that the grapple itself isn't interesting, nor is it actually in-depth enough to make them playable and well balanced in a way that would make them fun to play with against other players. Because with the way that they are designed, they're either gonna be the noob killer that just makes your friend not want to play with you anymore, or your friend knows how to play around them and they're just utterly useless, so you would never pick them. And yeah, in terms of game design, I feel like that's something that could have really been improved. You know, when it comes to balance, it's not so much about making sure that everything is fair, but at the very least making it such that everything actually achieves the intended experience of the game. And if the intended experience of the game is to ensure that every style is fairly represented within the game, then you kind of want to make sure that there isn't a specific style that is, because of the way it has been designed, completely useless within the game, especially when it's a fairly big part of the original anime series as well. So the next problem of the game is basically the characters themselves, and I don't mean that in terms of the personality of the characters, but the way that they were selected for the game. So you have 9 base characters that you can play as, and there are 4 hidden characters that you have to unlock by beating the arcade mode on at least one character. There are unfortunately multiple issues with this in spite of the fact that it sounds like something that should have been very simple. For one thing, when it comes to the hidden characters, the game doesn't actually tell you that you've unlocked them at all. Like, the game doesn't have at the end of the arcade mode something to tell you like, hey, congratulations, you've unlocked this guy you can use now, or something like that. There's none of that at all. There is nothing in the in-game manual that comes with the CD as well to tell you how to unlock the characters, and the game doesn't actually pop up the hidden characters on the character select when you have unlocked them. So it's not like you have the base 9 and when you unlock the new guy you have 10. Instead, you need to push the R1 button, and while holding on to the R1 button, push down on the specific 4 characters that are tied to the hidden characters, and in doing so, in the split second before the character selection menu fades out, the character's portrait will change into the hidden character instead, and that's the only way you know that you have actually successfully selected the hidden character. What the fuck is this system? Like, how is anybody supposed to know? There's 4 of these characters, which means that they actually intend for you to be using them, because 4 compared to the base 9, that's almost 50% of the base roster hidden away as like hidden characters as well. Or if you look at a full roster, that's a third of the entire roster as hidden characters. So you would expect that the game wants you to use them, but they don't teach you how to unlock them, nor how to select them. It's all very bizarre. And the worst part is the game doesn't even tell you they exist. Like, in the manual, they actually have the moveset of every single character in the game, and they actually do tell you that one specific character, this one at the very last page here, is a secret character in the game that you have to unlock. But they don't tell you that for the other 3, all of whom are not on this manual at all. And the only reason why this character at the back here is on the manual is because of the fact that she is actually a original character for the PlayStation game. I feel like if that weren't the case, she wouldn't even be here either, and not like it really matters for most of the players because they probably have given up the game before they even got to this point. And also, one other thing is that aside from that one character I just mentioned, the rest of them, because of the fact that they're not actually stated on the manual, their movesets are not known to you. This is one other bizarre thing with this game. Because of how old it is, it kind of was created in the era where they kind of expected you would actually read the manual that comes with the game. So they actually put a lot of important information within this. So all of the characters, like special attack patterns that you can actually trigger, are all in here, and each of them does have some level of difference. Like, some of them do use the R1, R2 buttons, some do not. Like the secret hidden character here, her R2 button is just to BM the opponent, for example, whereas like with some of them, like the main character himself, his R1 actually triggers a very, very strong 1-inch punch instead, which may I mention, the balance on feels kind of broken as well. So you kind of don't really have a good way to figure out the movesets of the actual hidden characters themselves. And if you don't have access to the manual for some reason, you have no way to figure it all out as well, because of the fact that there is no like push start, go to a move list, check move list for the characters like many modern games do. The QOL in that sense is really bad because of the fact that once you have selected the characters, you don't really get all of this information provided to you to actually figure out what you need to do or how best to use the characters either. And you want to know what's the icing on the cake for all of this? The game doesn't even have a way for you to save. Yeah, I'm not shitting you. The game has no save functionality whatsoever, meaning that when you unlock the hidden characters, the next time you boot up the game, they're all gone. You have to re-unlock all of them over again. Your record in the Gauntlet Survival mode, wiped. What is going on? It's 1998 when this came out. The game gives you actual character and like progression and records, and then it just wipes all of that every single game. It's actually fucking insane. Like, why is this even a thing? In a way, it's kind of weird because the game actually works fine if you're playing it on an emulator, because you can just save state the game and like you kind of get your save progression from there. But why was this even a thing? And what it looks like, there are a lot of characters within the game. It actually does a pretty bad job of actually representing all the different fighting styles within the original series as well, because there's only really 5 different fighting styles represented across the 12 characters. You have 2 characters that use the main protagonist's fictional karate style. You have 5 people who use karate, out of which 4 of them come from the same school. You have 3 wrestling characters, out of which 2 are the same person. And then you have the jujutsu guy who's the priest man, as well as the person who uses the Mongolian sumo as well, the additional extra unique character of the game. So yeah, for the most part, you're getting a lot of repetition. The people who have the same styles basically have most of their basic moves generically the same as well. So there's a lot of very obvious reuse of motions as well. And because of the fact that in the original series, in the manga itself, a lot of the characters are, I guess you could say, the importance, the uniqueness is in the way that they look themselves, more so than the way that they are dressing, because they're all dressing like regular people. In the game, because of the fact that the graphics are so bad, you can't really tell most of them apart, and it actually starts to look very bland and boring because of the fact that everybody kind of dresses the same way. Because with a total of like 7 karate users, it basically means that 50% of your actual character roster is just wearing a gi with a black belt, compared to many of the other fighting games out there, which most of them were initially designed with arcades in mind. Character designs tend to pop a lot more because you want people to actually look at the characters and be able to immediately differentiate them apart, immediately be able to get in the game, know who they are controlling, and be able to attach themselves to the character. This game, because it's based off of a manga series where that was not really a thing, it kind of loses out on that front. So as a result, between that and the fact that the characters have such similar styles and motions, it kind of makes the process of playing the game feel very monotonous as well. And the direction this game chose with the fighting styles as well was just so bizarre to me because of the fact that they only chose specifically these 5, when it's not like the entire series or even the early series was focused around just these 5 alone. There were many other forms of fighting that were different in their own way, which feel like they could have been uniquely used for the game as well. Like there was actually boxing within the manga as well, and like I feel like that would have been an interesting one that they could have represented in the game because of the fact that it would have been a style that focuses almost completely on just like footwork movement and using your fists instead. So in a game where you have martial artists who are using specifically a mix of both their legs as well as their hands to fight, and you have like jujutsu fighters who don't really even do much of punching or kicking and who really focus on trying to close gap, get you to the ground, all of that, who have a character or a style that would have focused purely on upper body movement and fighting as well, feels like it could have been interesting. And it's not like it's something that is too far out of the realm of possibility, considering the fact that even Street Fighter managed to successfully do that. So yeah, I genuinely do not know what they were trying to do with any of this, to be honest, because of how bad all of that design was. Also, one funny thing that they did was that in the Gauntlet mode of the game, they actually have a unique character specifically for the Gauntlet mode, who was basically just like the Zako scrub that is just there as like cannon fodder for you to punch your way through multiple times. And apparently he's actually meant to be the first ever character that the protagonist ever fights, and he just beats him down really quickly in the manga. It's supposed to be a reference to that, but apparently he's like so unimportant of a character at the time when this game released that nobody even knew who he was. So people like saw him in the game and were going like, who the fuck is that? Why is he here? And yeah, it feels like such a waste of man hours as well as like development time to put in this guy and not have him be playable and have him be just a wooden block for you to knock down during the Gauntlet mode itself. Additional funny thing on top of that is that that was the initial complaint as well that people had for the game when it initially released, but the character actually recurred many years later and became actually super strong and a important part of one of the later arcs, so that was also really funny as well. Like things also start to fall apart more when we finally get to the character selection itself, because for some reason they managed to mess it up so bad that the mini character icons at the bottom of the screen and the actual character portraits that pop up actually look so different that some of them actually look like different people altogether. Like, who's this? Why does he have such a long chin? Why did they make half of the cast of this game suddenly characters of Gaku and Handsome instead? Like, why the chin? The actual guy doesn't even have a chin that's that big. Like, what's going on? And more to the priest guy, his skin tone doesn't even match on the icon as well as on the portrait. And look, I understand, right? Like, lighting is a thing that exists. Alright, I look more pale and yellow on screen right now because of the fact that my light is orange, right? The orange light makes me look more yellow. I get that. You turn it off and suddenly I look a little less pale because of the fact that everything is dark now, right? Lighting is a thing that can change how a person looks, but at the same time, why is it so different in the portrait in the game where lighting is not a thing that should exist? Where you would want the consistency so people know who they're actually picking within the game. Like, why is the portrait for the second guy so zoomed in? It's only for him that it's like so weirdly zoomed, and it's not like he's a big guy. When they actually show his portrait in the game itself on the left, he actually looks fairly normal size. His head actually isn't like ballooned to 50 times the size of his body. If anything, he looks like he's having the Space Marine problem where his head looks like it might actually be too small for how buff he actually potentially might be. So like, I don't get why the inconsistency here either.
Alright contestants, it's time for you to battle to the death. Come, bring me the first challenger. Yes, I'm ready for for the challenge. Wait a minute. This looks nothing like you. Well, I guess you could say I was a little depressed that day. Or I guess you could say I had quite a long face. Disgusting. Get him out of my sight. Next stop, bring me. Bring me this one? Yeehaw! I'm ready! Oh, this looks nothing like you as well! Well, you see, I guess you could say I was having a little problem sleeping on the day. You could say I was a little bit too wide awake. Okay, so what's with you? What's your fucked up image gonna look like then? What do you mean? I don't look that fucked up, do I? I mean, Wait, no, I didn't mean it like that!
So like there's a lot of very small strange discrepancies going on the character select screen as is, and you know, you could say that this is not much of an issue because, like, you know, when you can look at the portrait on the left anyway to figure out who you're picking, and like, yeah, they're kind of off, but at least you can still kind of tell who they are when you're picking them. But you know, you would want to at least have some level of consistency with things like this, especially since it shouldn't be too difficult to ensure that two different JPEGs that you have prepared for the game do match in design when you're only at the character select screen of the game, and you don't want to give players additional load to confuse them where there really isn't a necessity to, right? We're not even talking about like, oh, the games are being made too easy because people nowadays don't like challenge. It's none of that. We're literally just talking about how when you make two things of the same character, why not make them look similar so that people can spend less time trying to figure out how to process all of this in their head. Speaking of staying true to the series itself, this is something that I feel like the game does kind of miss the mark on in quite a few ways, considering the fact that it doesn't even have any form of story mode, which I find to be really bizarre, because if you're gonna make a fighting game based off a manga series, to some extent people aren't expecting a full just fighting game experience. They're expecting it to some extent tie back to the original series, kind of like the Dragon Ball fighting game that actually turns up in EVO every once in a while, right? You want a game that actually plays up the characters as well, because they are as important to the game as the fighting itself. Seeing the dynamics, the interactions between the characters, seeing the story mode play out within the game for some of the series, especially those that are very manga focused, seeing the story pan out into an actual battle and all of that is still an important part of the experience and what makes some of these games really shine. And this game has none of that at all. You really only have two choices of game modes. You can actually play the game in arcade mode, which is basically just you going through all the battles with there being no defeat scene where they go like, "You have bested me, Mr. Tanaka," or something like that. There's no like even flavor text before the battles and after the battles. There's only this very basic bare bones arcade mode, and there is a survival gauntlet mode, which is basically just the arcade mode, except that the battles go on forever and your HP progresses and carries forward to the next battle as well. So suffice to say, in terms of it doing its job as a game for fans of the series, it wasn't doing that well either, which leads into the initial issue of this game, which is that it really does feel like it really wasn't designed for anyone in particular in mind. Like, the fans won't actually get the best experience they could have potentially gotten out of the series because it doesn't do anything in terms of service for the fans, and it really wouldn't do anything for people who really want a good fighting game because of the fact that this released during the boom of the fighting games 1 week after Tekken. You think people are gonna buy this after seeing Tekken? Like, it didn't even have to be like the worst game of the year. Just being a below average game would have been enough to kill it off at that point. And so the fact that graphically it looks like a step down from most games of that era is already working against it, and the fact that it doesn't do enough in terms of the fan service also kind of disadvantages the game in my opinion. And the only thing that makes all of this even worse is just the fact that even when you beat the arcade mode, you don't really get anything at all. Like, you literally get a single paragraph on screen just flash there, a single JPEG of the character in the back, and yeah, that's it. And the thing is that for most of the characters, the cutscenes themselves are all like extremely generic. For example, with Leon's route, the funny priest guy, he kind of just retires and goes back to like funding an orphanage, and the end. Yeah, he just like retires. He gives up all of his like martial arts skills except for the self-defense ones to protect the kids, and he just goes back to the orphanage, the end. The main character just vanishes. Yeah, they just kind of like, haha, I have shown my power. Okay, bye. And they just kind of just like yeet themselves out of the existence. So like there's a lot of this where the endings themselves are so poorly written that it's almost bizarre. And I can imagine being a fan of the series and just seeing that and being extremely pissed about how little care was put into it at all. Like what? You're a fan of the series? You want to buy this game to see your favorite character, see how they progress and where they end up? What are you, stupid? Fine, here's a single stupid ass paragraph. Okay, go, sure, fuck off. We have money to be making. In that regard, I think even the Jujutsu Kaisen Clash game did a better job of that, because while that game was a shitty fighting game, I know it's an arena battle instead, so it's slightly different, but it sucks ass worse than dipping your balls in like car battery acid. But at the very least, it did a better job with the fan service than this game did by miles, in my opinion. It just feels like a disappointment through and through for the fans of the game. Which, in my opinion, once again, because of the fact that this is a character-based fighting game, it's not just a pure fighting game on its own. I do believe that both of these are important in almost equal measure. Yes, the fighting game, the gameplay itself needs to be fun as well to get people to adopt the game, but because of the fact that it's a game that's based off a pre-existing IP, the goals of the game should be to also ensure that the people who enjoy the IP are getting a good experience out of it. And the perfect game would be the one that manages to meld both of these together to create a game that is a solid fighting game, while also ensuring that the people who are fans of the manga series itself do get a level of enjoyment out of it because of the fact that they can play around with all of these different characters that they know and love and get to like replicate some of the things that happen within the anime and the manga itself. Yes, the two can sometimes run into contention because of the fact that balance is always an issue, right? You can't have Goku be as strong as someone like Yamcha, for example, especially not in the later parts of the series. But at the same time, all of these things, depending on how it is designed within the game, you can still to some extent balance it out by having other characters of equal strength and having very obviously different tiers for character. And in a sense, with something like the Dragon Ball fighting game that was played quite extensively at EVO, you do have the advantage of it being multiple characters. So you do have the fact that the characters being able to be swapped in and out, the fact that they have their support skills and all of that. It can matter a lot more in ways that maybe a 1v1 game cannot replicate. And in that sense, something like that, or something like Marvel vs. Capcom, for example, do tend to capture a little better the better balance of the two in terms of ensuring that you have the character fan service there, while also having a game that can be competitive and interesting, because even if a character by virtue of the lore needs to be weaker, at the very least you can balance it out to make sure that they actually are interesting or usable or viable in their own different ways as well. But yeah, this game just does none of that whatsoever. But yeah, overall that's all we really have to say about the game. Personally, looking at all of this, yeah, it's not the best game. It is, as a fighting game, at least serviceable. As a character game, fails quite a fair bit. But is this game truly worthy of being called the worst game on like the Famitsu cross review? Personally, I don't really think so. I feel like there have been many way worse games that have been released over the years across many different genres that have also been reviewed by the Famitsu cross review, like games like Nugia, for example, games like the Bandai Namco fishing like festival simulator thing that we played before as well. Those were games that actually felt like they were giving me negative emotions instead, like the way that the festival simulator worked with the way that it actually required you to pose and like move your hands that actually hurt my wrist, the way that some of the mini games were designed to feel like they would infuriate the players more than give them an enjoyable experience, like something like that feels like it does so many things badly. If we were to make a tier list with this game on it, I feel like it would probably be somewhere in the lower half of the tier list. But even then, I don't think I will put this game anywhere near the bottom, not by a fair margin, because it is still a game that I didn't really get any negative emotions playing through it from start to finish. But that said, that's all I have for you guys for today. Thank you all for watching, and I hope this was an interesting look at the first ever consumer title to actually end up with the lowest score on the Famitsu cross review. Thank you to the very epic people who helped to support the channel, as thanks to you guys that continue to make videos like these as well. And thank you to every one of you for watching as well, since it's a thanks to the mixture of all of you that I continue to make videos as well in the first place. But that said, that's all from me for today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. But until then, take care and bye-bye.